Welcome to the Wolf and Bull podcast. I am the Wolf, and my co-host, the Bull, is projecting himself through a funny little screen. We've decided that we're now an entirely remote podcast going forward. We're just sick and tired of seeing each other in studio. It's too hard. So we have to adapt to the popular decisions these days. So everything is now going to be remote and through a remote app. It's great. We have an incredibly special episode today with the founder of Digital Dispatch, the host of Cyberly on Freight Waves, co-founder of the Jax Podcasters Unite, board member of Transportation Marketing and Sales Association, creator of guysgirl.com, owner of Brumleve Brands, and known as the voice of the female sports fan. Welcome to the show, Blythe Brumleve.
Thank you guys so much for having me. When you're reading off that long list, I'm like, oh God, I know how to get hours back in my day now. Stop doing all the things.
Yeah, I had to rhyme it.
Lengthy list.
Yeah, that's great. It's good. It's good. It's a good thing. I hope to have as long a list as that one day. But yeah, just before we get started, for our listeners and our viewers, just a quick reminder, if you like what you hear, then make sure to follow us on Instagram. You can also find us on YouTube and all of the major podcasting platforms. Additionally, we are making waves on the relatively totally not communist platform TikTok. So you can find us there as well. And make sure to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. Blythe, before we jump into the monologue, I have to say you have quite a turbulent story, yet one that I think serves as a great beacon of hope for aspiring business leaders within any industry. Can you give our listeners and our viewers some insight into your story and who you are today?
Sure. So I started off with creating content online back in 2007. I am a sports and entertainment fan, and I was frustrated because all of my close friends didn't really like the same things that I liked. They didn't like going to football games. They didn't like Star Wars or playing video games or anything like that. So I started up a website to teach them how to like the things I like in an egotistical sort of way. But then it was shortly thereafter that social media sort of started coming to life. I think Twitter launched in 2008. Facebook was a couple of years before that. So these different social media platforms started coming to life, and I discovered, hey, I don't necessarily have to, teach my friends how to understand this stuff when there's already women that are online that appreciate the same things. So that's where kind of the idea started to create the site guysgirl.com. Which was really catered towards the female fan and giving the female fan a voice that wasn't, covered in pink and glitter. It was really, giving the true sports fan a voice and giving the true, entertainment fan a voice as well. So that's where the idea for Guys Girl came around, and it was also that same week that I started the blog was also the same time I started working at a 3PL, which is a third-party logistics provider. I was working as an executive assistant, and when my boss found out about my side hustle, he was like, you should just take over all of our, marketing and media and websites and start doing this, for us as well. And so in 2008, 2009, I think the third year, right? That's when I really was sort of thrown into, thrown into the fire of marketing and, the concept of inbound marketing and creating those different strategies in a B2B world. I'd come from, the B2C world, so I was I kind of had my foot in both of those areas. And so working for a 3PL for years, I was able to, go to different conferences and, invest in learning of how to, do all these different marketing concepts, web development and all of that good stuff. So I parlayed that into a career. So I started working for, unfortunately, back up. Unfortunately, that logistics company ended up closing down after 5 years. And so after that, I was kind of in a fork in the road, like, well, what do I do as far as career-wise? That's when I went to start working at a North Florida-based magazine. So I'm based in Jacksonville, Florida. So I went to work for them, became their editor-in-chief. And it was the first time that I really was surrounded by a creative team. So photographers and illustrators and graphic designers and writers. And that's where I really got a taste of what it's like to not only work at an agency, but also work at a magazine, crafting different stories than what I was used to traditionally. So I worked for that magazine for a couple of years. Also during that time, I was given an opportunity to work in radio for this, I don't want to say strange reason. I never went to broadcasting school, but I was known in the Jacksonville community as a huge Jaguars fan and, a content creator in that regard. So I was hired on to co-host the first all-football show hosted by all women in the country. So it's called Helmets and Heels, and it's still going strong here in Jacksonville, Florida. So I co-hosted that for 5 years. I also co-hosted the kickoff show, which appeared on Jaguar game days. And then that kind of led back into me using all of this insight that I got from the sports and entertainment world and going back into the logistics world because I saw there was a real opportunity for future growth versus the sports industry where you kind of have to be on you have to have the most outrageous opinions, you have to be the loudest. That's where I saw a lot of sports coverage sort of trending, and it just didn't appeal to me. But also being like a sideline reporter didn't appeal to me either. I really wanted to be on camera, doing shows and giving an opinion. And that's where I still, to this day, there's a lot of women that are given sports roles or on-camera roles within the sports industry, but they're mostly reserved to breaking news, to moderating the panel, to sideline reporting, and that just frankly didn't interest me. So there was more opportunity in logistics and freight in order to make content, and so I saw a greater career trajectory in that area. So came back to freight, started Digital Dispatch, and eventually led to more opportunities, of course, with Great Waves and Cyberly. Also just released a maritime-focused podcast series with Spire Maritime. So it was really the past couple of years have been a culmination of 10 years of blogging and social media work that has all sort of come to fruition.
Well, it seems like a lot of that is really ramping up as well. It's not like, I've thought about this for a little while because I've, jumped into the logistics, let's put some information, aggregated, curated podcasts, things like that out on our site as well. And it still feels like it's kind of at its infancy. Maybe teenager, not infancy, but it's coming into its own. There's a lot more things happening in the space, and I think you hit an interesting remark a few seconds ago, and you talked about marketing. I think you said it like 2 or 3 times. And in the entertainment space, the loudest voice, the most controversial subject, kind of turns into some kind of a profit for who is ever trying to market that information on the sports scene or whatever else. But in the logistics space, I know that it's a little bit different. But I think marketing first in your head is what's missing a lot with people online. They just think content, but they've got to translate that into some product or service at the end of the discussion, if you will. So very, very interesting, and you're to be commended. You kind of, you talked about sideline reporters and females doing the moderation in sports world, things like that. It sounds to me like if you and your companions were the first female radio broadcast, I think you said, in the nation. I mean, you're right at the forefront of this. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was an incredible opportunity because you don't have too many women that are giving their opinion online. Yep. And giving your opinion online is challenging for some folks. I know there were certainly occasions that you're reporting on the Jaguars and you're giving your opinion on the Jaguars, and they haven't exactly been a good team over the last say
you just beat the Colts. We're terrible. You destroyed us. We were good last year. We're garbage. I'm done watching.
The Wolf is a Colt fan. So.
I'm done watching football. We're gonna bring in Matt Ryan. He's gonna be so good. No, he's trash. Absolute trash. Trash. And so I might join the Jaguars. I might just start watching you guys because we suck.
Oh man, see, well, that's the difference between I think with a Jaguar fan and just knowing. I feel like the losing has just been so ingrained in us. But I would never say that I'm going to go become a Titans fan or something like that. I would rather just bury me in the dirt before that would ever happen.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Yeah,
I've been a Detroit Lions fan all my life, unfortunately, I'm in the same basket as the Jaguar fans.
Terrible. Well, and I would never switch. I would never switch. Honestly, I would never switch. Like I have been a Colts fan since I was a little kid. Yeah, like heat of the moment. Like I remember when Andrew Luck retired, the year I picked him on fantasy. The day of he retired. So I just don't know what's going on. I just think that there's like Mercury's in retrograde or something. Like it's just not our year. It hasn't been our year ever. Like the last time it was our year is when we won the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. So we're not good. So, but thankfully, I can sit down. We can sit down and we can talk about football. We can talk about the Jaguars, and we can all be friends because that's what friends do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you notice Blythe's cup said 904 on it? Right.
Yeah.
That's dedication right there.
Yeah.
It's definitely. I don't know if people can see it, but yes, it's
very good.
A donut bar here in Jacksonville, and the O is a donut. So it is literally ingrained in our culture, and it's one of those things where we expect failure now, especially after last year in the Urban Meyer fiasco. As a franchise, I did not think that we could go any lower, and then that happened.
Yeah.
And there's only one way to go, and that's up. And it's been a pleasant surprise, but it's also still like I'm very cautiously optimistic about this team. Vegas, even I learned a long time ago to trust betting odds and not myself. So I look to Vegas to tell me how many wins this team will realistically get this year. But, you just got to hope that, that you do get a chance at a franchise quarterback. And the Colts definitely have. I mean, you went from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck and you won a Super Bowl. So it's like, in the grand scheme of things, like you were living the high life.
Yeah, we broke Luck. He retired because of us. Okay, not specifically us, not the fan base, but because of what's his name, Chuck Pagano. And who was the GM? Do you remember the GM, Chris, at that time?
No.
Wasn't Chris Ballard. Chris Ballard's been pretty good.
It was Ballard.
Are you sure?
It was Ballard, wasn't it? No, I'm not.
He might have came in. But I know that Reich and Ballard are on the chopping block for a lot of fans right now. And honestly, they should be. We brought in Old Man Rivers, and now we have Older Man Ryan. They can't. Don't defend Matt
Rivers
Ryan.
Was great. He just couldn't throw anymore.
So same with Matt Ryan. It's like watching. It's painful. It hurts.
Well,
the quarterback is such a difficult position to target. I mean, we know for sure. And we just hope
Bortles.
That, we haven't completely ruined Trevor Lawrence. And just hope that he is, a fraction of what they say, is a generational talent, once in a lifetime. We just hope.
You'll know he's ready. You'll know he's ready when he cuts his hair. That's when you'll know.
Oh, get out of here! No, he's that's where the power comes from. He's like Samson. His power comes from his hair, and that's I don't think you guys ruined him. I think he's fine, and frankly, he came from. I mean, I followed him since high school. Same with Justin Fields. Fields, ironically enough, over time performed better statistically, but hasn't gone to a better team. I think the Jaguars are slightly better than the Bears at this point in time, but I think he needed to have a year of getting the absolute, crap beat out of him because he's always won. So it's good for one's character. Brought him back down, and now he's like, I can bring them to the next level. Like they're not going to do it for me. I'm going to change the team. And I think that I think he's learned a little bit, and I think he is that generational talent. So hopefully the Colts figure it out. I'll just watch from the sideline, envious of the Jaguars of actually having someone who can throw the football as opposed to an elderly man.
Yeah. Like that.
I wanted Lawrence. Man. I thought we would trade up. I thought we would have at least attempted to do something for a franchise QB over the last few years, and we've done absolutely nothing. We just wait for the people who have the end of their careers coming, and we bring them to Indianapolis because that's just how we do things. We are the dumpster fire
for like 15 years.
But that's.
I think the Wolf is complaining a little too much, Blythe.
When was the last time he was on the Colts?
He's not a Detroit fan. He's not a Jacksonville
2010?
fan. He's an Indy fan.
I am, yeah.
I mean, honestly, I don't want to say spoiled, but definitely going from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck is and I understand, the frustration around Andrew Luck retiring, but my God, I just hope that Trevor Lawrence is a fraction of what Peyton Manning was, a fraction of what Andrew Luck, was. That is my only cautiously optimistic. I'm used to having terrible seasons, but I just really, really hope that
Yeah, I think
positive moving in the future.
Yeah, I think Lawrence is gonna be good. But yeah. But on that note, should I jump into the monologue? Should we jump into it?
Yeah,
Boom?
absolutely.
Okay. Cool. I normally have music with this, but I don't have music today, so we're just gonna have to go with the just the luscious sound of my voice.
You want me to hum in the background, or
you could do like a Gregorian chant a little bit. Yeah. So let's jump right into it. American football, one of the greatest sports besides ice hockey that has ever been created. Not to be confused with soccer, aka football, a name that definitely wasn't copyrighted when Americans blessed the world with our game. Football has been around for a long time, with the first match, quote-unquote, between two college teams, Rutgers and Princeton, occurring on November 6th, 1869. Walter Camp, known as the father of American football, created a set of rule changes in the 1880s that have led to the sport and every rational sports person every rational sports person has followed today. That's a lot of changes, led to some amazing things. American football is the most popular sport in the United States in terms of broadcast viewership and audience. Over 1.1 million high school athletes and over 70,000 college athletes annually play football. The NFL has the highest average attendance of any professional sports league in the world, and the Super Bowl ranks among the most watched sporting events in the world. The NFL is currently on track to rake in a godly amount of money by 2027, $25 billion. And we can probably directly relate that success to Roger Goodell, who could potentially be the quote-unquote worst commissioner in history, according to a 2011 article from BleacherReport.com. Nearly every year, that man experiences boos from the crowd at the NFL draft, and it's become almost a ritualistic reflex for NFL fans to boo him in any situation. According to an SBNation.com article from April of 2021, Goodell is the NFL's bureaucracy public-facing shill, paid for by the owners, mind you, so he's going to bear the brunt of fan frustration. Americans tend to like to boo, though. It's almost as reflective to us as violently protesting taxes, infighting over mostly ethereal issues we create, and in taking pizza at unsustainable rates. We boo Gary Bettman every year at the NHL draft. We boo NBA Commissioner Adam Silver when he isn't being cool or bald enough. And I would argue we'd even boo Mother Teresa if she were still alive. She had it coming anyway. As football fans and fantasy football champions compared to the likes of NFL great Bill Belichick himself, in strictly fantasy terms, the Bull and I enjoy the sport and we think it has an interesting future ahead. That's why we brought on Blythe Brumleve, someone who can potentially provide us with insight that the normal, not Wolf and Bull, fantasy football fans or football fans in general may not have. You guys like that? Was that nice?
Very nice. Very well done.
Yeah,
I think you're disparaging Mother Teresa a little bit, though.
Yeah, well, you know what?
Sure about that.
We should do a full episode on her.
She was a pretty good football fan, if I remember correctly, from Calcutta or wherever she was hanging out.
Wow.
But I think it was the other football. It was football, not football at the time over there.
I think my monologues are just becoming more fever dream based. It's there's a whole bunch of nonsense thrown into about a 30 or 45 second clip, and that's about it. So,
it's funny because I think Blythe got. I don't know. I mean, you were probably always a fan, right, of sports and things. It sounds like from introducing yourself, but it sounds like you got kind of thrust into the spotlight to learn more about this than maybe you ever thought you would. I don't know.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've always been a football and baseball and golf fan. It wasn't until I started working in sports because I did have when I worked in a magazine. When I left the magazine was to go cover sports full time because I thought that that's what I wanted to do. And I ended up working from home, covering college football, and so there was a big learning curve. I didn't know general college football. Living in Jacksonville, Florida, we're surrounded by Florida State fans, Gator fans, of course, Georgia fans, and to some extent Miami fans. And so, but I never went to college and went to like a traditional university and did the whole like college. I've been to college football games. I have to think about that for a second. I've been to like a couple of Louisville games because some of my family is from Louisville. So I've been to a couple of those games, but outside of that, it was really a giant learning curve. But I would almost say that working in sports tarnished my fanhood and tarnished my fandom, especially when it comes to the Jaguars, because when you work when you go from being a fan and then you go to covering sports and then you go to working with sports teams, you get to peek behind the curtain, and it's the corporate stuff that goes on, the toxicity. These are also employees working within these front offices that are, they are very, I guess, driven is probably a good way to put it. And some people, not all of them, of course, some people will throw you under the bus. They will steal your ideas. They will claim them as their own. And it is the corporate structure of the NFL that I grew to despise. And when your fandom is exposed to that, it really negatively affects it overall, to the point where, 2 years ago, I hated this team.
Really?
And it was also, it was during COVID, so we didn't have really any sports in general. Earlier in that year, and what's kind of swept under the rug now, and not a lot of people talk about, is that Jaguars ownership wanted to move another game to London. And rumors were that they were eventually going to move 4 of our home games to London. And I just thought that was a complete slap in the face by the ownership here within Jacksonville. And, we were accepting of 1 game in London because it did increase the national or the global profile of the city of Jacksonville. It led to a lot of businesses relocating here to town. But I would say that working for sports, in general, working for a radio station that was the official partner for the Jaguars, really tarnished my fandom. You get those first opportunities to interview players, and that is such a rush. And I remember the first time I was within a foot of Maurice Jones-Drew, and I could barely breathe. And it was one of those moments where it's like, okay, you got to get it together because you have a job to do, you have an interview to do. You can't. You have to find a way to turn the fan off. And I think that I got too close to turning the fan off and treating, my voice was always the strongest as speaking for the fan, but when your fandom is attacked by, I say attacked, wasn't really attacked, but it was put in jeopardy, especially when you take another game from the home fans who have given so much to this team, and you can't win in Jacksonville, so you're just going to take another game from us, the only thing that we actually really enjoy, the home game environment and being with our quote-unquote football family and tailgating and all the things that go along with going to a football game. You were just going to take this for extra money. And that's where, in the middle of working, and peeking behind the curtain and seeing how the sausage is made, I would say really tarnished it. And I'm glad that I left sports radio, because it's still, even now, I'm starting to get my fandom back. And that's where, the love of the team, regardless of what the administration or, the front office decisions or what some random person in PR has to say about you.
Well, that's interesting. And I had heard multiple times that the Jags were trying to be set up to actually do a permanent move to London as kind of the first advance of the worldwide expansion of the sport. And who knows what's going to happen in the future, because as you said, there's a big business component to this that as a fan, you kind of, it's there, but you kind of ignore it. It's the great Oz behind the curtain, and you hope to never learn who's really behind it. And people like yourself pulled back that curtain and went like, really? This is what's back here? Not only is it not what I thought, it's a lot more, I don't know. It's exactly.
A lot of politics.
Yeah.
I've always thought
that's in everything these days, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. God. Almost too much. I always thought that the NFL is kind of doing things weird when it comes to their different teams. I've always thought that we should adopt the football strategy and have different tiers. Kind of like the Champions League and the Premier League and all that. NFL being like I think the Premier is the top, so NFL being the Premier League. And then, if you're bad, you move down. I think that would make it interesting. I think we'd see more players. I think that we'd have opportunities for new teams. I think moving teams from United States to overseas, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I don't think it makes a lot of sense.
It doesn't. I'm 1,000% against it. And
I agree.
As someone who had our franchise sort of dangled in front of us for LA for years, and now it's London. It's just one of those things where you're doing this to communities and fans who don't deserve this, that are not going to reap any kind of benefits from this. We are essentially, paid subscribers to a team, and a lot of us, it's more than just that. It's the community around it. We've been tailgating in one spot for more than 25 years. The people that have come to that tailgate, I have seen them grow up. I have seen them have children. I have seen some people, they get too old to go to the games, but they still send their well wishes, their best wishes. I've seen tradition, and this is where sports is so important, because it creates that family, it creates that camaraderie, it creates that sense of tradition. And to be on the other side of it and to see what kind of decisions are being made that completely forsake all of those things. I'm just vehemently against moving teams in general. God forbid, if I was a St. Louis fan, oh my God, I would be part of that lawsuit that's currently trying to sue the pants off of the Rams for choosing to leave a city after, dangling the franchise in front of them. I think that it should be abolished, and there should be some kind of a hierarchy, some kind of a system in place like the Premier League, where you have, teams that are regulated and teams that are given, the benefit of not the benefit of the doubt, but the benefit of making those good franchise decisions. There is a reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens and the Green Bay Packers, these franchises are run like good businesses, but also entrenched in the community. And to me, that's not promoted enough, being entrenched in the community and caring about your community.
See, Blythe, it's an interesting perspective, and I've lived on the West Coast for most of my life, even though I grew up in Michigan. And being from San Diego and the LA area, these giant markets, they control a lot of power. I could complain all day long about
good old Chargers.
NFL did to San Diego recently. I don't even want to. I'm still upset with that. But then you go drive by SoFi Stadium and you go, okay, I get it. And if you're from San Diego as a taxpayer, you're like, do I really want to pay for this, or do I want to go to the beach today? That's kind of the decision that's made. So I get it from a business standpoint, but to your point, I think there should be kind of ceilings or limits on what you can do, and there should be the long view from the business side that you're trying to entrench yourself in a community for 50 years, not 5, right? And if you've been tailgating in the same spot for a long time, that's pretty incredible. And there are a lot of places now where you can't even tailgate. Yeah, there's no place to tailgate. And if you do, you don't break out the barbecue and the beer, and you can't throw a football because the police are right there watching you. It's kind of crazy these days. Mm-hmm. So I don't know where it's all going, but the big business aspect of it, plus all the money comes from the cable stations and the online streaming and everything else, not from you and I going to a stadium anymore, I don't think.
It's really from the TV contracts. That's where they make all of their money. And merchandising.
I think it's unfortunate.
Go ahead.
I think it's unfortunate because it's like same thing like you could say about the Chargers, the Colts. I mean, I've been a Colts fan since I was 11 years old, and I have never lived there, which is weird. I'm one of those. I saw the first football game first football game I ever saw was Peyton Manning throwing the football on TV. He was playing the Chargers, and I was just not at that time interested in Drew Brees. I was a huge Peyton Manning fan. That eventually got me into football. But I don't know what the corporate strategy is when it comes to American football. The details there are probably outside of my purview. With that being said, I really wish there was more of a cultivation of culture from some of these teams. It's just, it's same thing with how they treat their players. I mean, you've got someone like Trevor Lawrence, who's a franchise QB. I'm not going to debate that. He's one of the most celebrated college QBs, along with Joe Burrow and Justin Fields. These people were unbelievable in college, and they're going to be very good if taken care of in the NFL. And for some reason, a lot of teams just kind of either really build the structure around that player, which it seems like they're doing in Jacksonville, or they choose not to build the structure. And you got a situation similar to what's going on with Aaron Rodgers, where he has a bunch of just shadows to throw the football to this year because he has no wide receivers. So it's interesting. It's very interesting to see those strategies as time goes on. And I think that if we did something similar to the Premier Leagues and the Champion Leagues and actually build a culture within those cities for football, then not only would there be a storied historical aspect of things that would bring more people in, but also it would make things more interesting.
Well, what is the rookie contracts are 4 years now, right? So a lot of these guys, is it 3 or 4? I can't remember.
It should be 3 years, and then with the option to pick up the fourth or the fifth.
There
year.
you go. Mm-hmm. So these like Jacksonville, their cap and their spending right now for the next two more years probably is everything surrounding their QB, because they still have a cheap enough contract with their QB to get something done. And they have to get far into the playoffs or develop enough structure around this guy to compete on a regular basis, or they're going to end up looking for another QB in 3 more years. That's kind of the way it's been going lately. I hate to see that, but that's what happens. I mean, the days of being with a team for your entire career they're just over. They just don't happen anymore. So,
and I think too that the coaching change has been such a dramatic impact. Having Doug Peterson here in town has been such a god. There was such a turmoil when the Urban Meyer fiasco happened, because Urban Meyer was brought in after a period of almost complacency, and I would say that we had Doug Marrone for years, and after having Gus Bradley for years. Gus Bradley was a very positive kind of guy and a rah-rah kind of guy, but in reality you need some of that tough love too. And then Doug Marrone was on staff under Gus Bradley, and so Doug Marrone was kind of just brought in as hey, let's give him a shot for a year, and it turned into be several years. And so after the sort of complacency wears off with Doug Marrone, then as Shad Khan, the owner of the Jaguars, chooses to swing big, and I admire his decision to swing big and go after somebody like an Urban Meyer. I just did not, and I think that everybody involved in the process did not see it crashing and burning as drastically as it did. And I'm going from that in having a situation where we had almost a really intense battle between somebody like a Doug Peterson and then Byron Leftwich, who used to be quarterback of the Jaguars. I think he was selected in the top 10. Maybe he was the 11th pick years ago in Jaguars franchise history. But he went on to be the offensive coordinator in Tampa. I think he is still the offensive coordinator in Tampa under Tom Brady, of course. So he was campaigning hard to be the Jaguars head coach. And one of the issues that we had is that you can't. It's very difficult to go home and to take the franchise to the next level. But I remember Doug Peterson. He said after the 2017, when they went to the Super Bowl, it was like 2018, what we call the 2017 season. So the Eagles went to the Super Bowl to play against the Patriots, and that was the year that the Jaguars went to the AFC Championship game and were leading with 10 minutes left in the AFC Championship game. And Tom Brady, of course, does his Tom Brady thing and ends up beating the Jaguars. But Doug Peterson later wrote that in his book that he watched that game and noticed how the Jaguars took their foot kind of off the neck and took their foot off the gas pedal, and how he chose not to do that during the Super Bowl, and that's what led them to winning. And so being able to have somebody like that as a head coach who's experienced, who's been in those high-intensity decision-making situations like a Super Bowl, that was extremely important to me to have that level of experience, because as a franchise, we've never really had that. And hopefully, with his quarterback skills, quarterback coaching skills, that will lead to hope for Trevor Lawrence. Because I really have been fearful for a while that Urban Meyer essentially ruined him. When you're kicking players who are already injured, and when you're hanging out with women who are not your wife, and it's just poor decision making. You can't even. In certain press conferences, he couldn't remember his own player's name.
Yeah,
what are we doing here?
He's the Adam Levine of football. He's just that. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine. Trevor got a taste of college again. It's all right. It's good. It's okay. Yeah.
No, get him out of here. It's not okay.
Yeah.
Well, and Peterson's a really good coach. I honestly don't understand Philly. I mean, think of the last 2 coaches they got rid of. I mean, one is perennially in either the Super Bowl or the AFC Championship, and you watch, Jacksonville's going to have a run. I mean, anything can go wrong. You can get somebody hurt and things can change and all that kind of stuff. But I think your spot in that tailgate spot is secure for some time.
Hope so.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, I mean, we've touched on it a little bit, but obviously, American football is a pretty male-dominated field, with about 2.5% of football players being women, while the other 97% are men. And obviously, this is kind of segueing into one of our topics, but as of May 2022, according to Statista.com, the level of interest in the NFL in the United States by gender is pretty heavily skewed. On the male side of things, 46% of viewers consider themselves avid fans, 30% consider themselves casual fans, and 24% of males are not fans at all. How dare you, 24%? On the female side of things, though, 21% consider themselves avid fans, 35% consider themselves casual fans, and 44% are not a fan at all. Blythe, with the genders basically being inversed when it comes to interest levels, what do you think can be done to level out the field and bring more interest to the game?
Well, I mean, I've covered some of these stats before, and so I would, trying to do the math in my head, it's like, what, more than 40? Last I heard, it was somewhere around 44-45% of all fans within the NFL are female, and I think that that's a great thing. There's a level of, I would say, almost craziness to be an avid fan, especially an avid fan of a losing team. But I think that it just depends on the market that you're in, because where I'm from, for example, Jacksonville, Florida, we face a lot of the similar issues that the San Diego crowd faces. You have great weather, you have the beaches, you have so many different things to do that are capturing your attention. Where should you spend your time and invest your time and money? And for a lot of people, time is the bigger investment versus the money aspect. And so for a lot of fans, I see them moving more towards, male or female, I see them moving more towards being a casual fan, watching games on the go. Before I would swear, don't send me a wedding invitation during football season. And I have completely flip-flopped on that. I had it's a kind of a sad story, but I have a girlfriend who got married, had a huge wedding, and she had it in November. And I said, that's Jaguar season, I'm not going. Because she had her wedding on a Sunday. And now to think back to it, I don't even know what game I missed, but I remember missing her wedding. So it's making those different decisions on what's important in life and what isn't. And sometimes I question, is this all worth it? Like, is being a super diehard sports fan worth? I really question that. And I think the last 2 years have kind of affected that as well, just because, there's a lot of, there was a lot of BS going on with sports, especially during COVID. Right. Teams are playing, they're not playing, players that can play, that not play. Just a lot of just craziness that went on. Plus, the attempt by our ownership group to move another home game to London, it really put me in sort of like an identity crisis of how I was going to evolve my fandom. Now I'm a little bit more okay with, not revolving the entire work day or the entire day around the Jaguars. I would still say, tailgating is still an enormous time that, for example, last Sunday was our home opener. So it was a 1:00 game. So we're busy prepping food and all the supplies on Saturday. And then we get to the tailgate spot at 9:30 a.m. You tailgate until the game starts. And then after the game, you can't really leave right away because traffic is so bad. So you end up spending the majority of your weekend centered around a football team. And sometimes I do think, what could I do with that time back instead? All the things that I could accomplish. But at the same time, it's still, on a Sunday like that where you do get a win. And, we've had, 5 wins over the last 2 years? So, that sort of starts to bring it back.
Yeah.
So winning.
And 2 of those wins were against Indianapolis, by the way.
Yeah, why do you have to do that? Why do you have to do that?
I had to.
Dare I remind you that we beat you in the playoffs when we won the Super Bowl. So I don't want to have to do that.
I don't remember being on the field.
You were on the Chargers. You were on the Chargers. Yeah,
I was on the Chargers.
You were the safety. Yeah, that's weird. It's really strange.
Oh, I was the bull in the background is what I was.
Yeah.
But you know what, Blythe? I bet you, though, when the Jags go to the playoffs this year, your avid fan caliber will be turned up a little higher than it was previously. But
because I can tell you from the 2017 experience that I had all these I damn near quit radio that season of that year because we had a couple players in the August of that season. One player retired that we traded for. Was it Brandon Albert or something? I think it was Brandon Albert. But anyways, he retired in the month of August, and he was supposed to be our free agent signing.
Right.
Jaguars historically don't develop players all that well. A lot of them we just let go or trade away. Jalen Ramsey is a famous one who just got so sick and fed up with this franchise that he demanded a trade and faked a back injury in order to make it happen. So that's what's happening with players that come to this franchise. And I hope that it's going to be better, but I think I've just been burned so many times in the past that I'm just I'm going to go into each game with the hope that we will win, but the expectation that we will lose.
Do you think that the NFL in general has seen the same thing you kind of alluded to, where the fan is becoming a more casual instead of an avid fan? And where I'm going with this is, sports betting is almost ubiquitous now. You can do it anywhere, anytime. Heck, we have a franchise in Vegas now, which I thought they'll never happen, right? And we have that now. Do you think that part of the reason for those kind of eventualities is to create more attention to the game, that maybe those casual fans, if they got a few dollars bet on something, or if they're into the fantasy side of things, now they become avid again?
I think that fantasy has directly led to sports gambling being legalized. I mean, it was essentially gambling anyways, and it was a way, going back to, the reasons why I started a blog. I've also had an all-girls fantasy football team or fantasy football league for 12 years now, 11, 12 years that we've had this league in existence. And that was the way that my friends learned about more players on other teams besides the Jaguars. So most of them were all Jaguars fans, but then they moved into learning more about other teams because of fantasy football. So I think it's definitely almost like a gateway drug, sports gambling, in order to have a little, action on it. But I still think that, especially when it comes to sports betting, as big of an NFL fan that I am, I rarely bet on sports. Rarely. If I were to, but I'm also not the biggest gambler, so I might just be, I'm the type of person that loses $30 at a slot machine and swears to never, play a slot machine again.
No, I relate. I get it.
So I'm not the biggest gambler in that aspect of I guess the gambling conversation, but when it comes to sports, that's where I do feel like I have, more of a knowledge base that I could earn some extra cash, but I don't see a lot of casual fans navigating to betting. I think that it's more for the die-hard fans in order to, make other games more enticing outside of fantasy football. I think fantasy football is almost like the level 1 of sports gambling, where the legitimate sports gambling, over-unders and all these random bets that you can take during a game, how long someone sings a national anthem or something like that. Those kind of sports betting, I think, is more for the avid fans, because you really have to have that insider knowledge in order to make educated guesses. So unless a major platform makes betting stupid easy for folks like myself to do it, I don't know that I see it. I see it as an additional revenue stream for the NFL, a big revenue stream. Might even get to the point where it's as lucrative as some of these TV contracts or some of these streaming contracts. I don't see a lot of casual fans taking up sports betting.
Now, it's interesting you bring up fantasy football. Obviously, that's something that tons of people are getting involved in more and more every year. And unfortunately, I feel like it's kind of taken me away from being an avid fan. I used to enjoy watching the Colts play, and now it's more like I'll catch the highlights on YouTube or I'll catch the highlights on ESPN. And frankly, fantasy kind of requires me, at least in years past, I'm not doing it this year, I'm adamantly not doing it this year, to watch games about teams that I just don't care about. And I feel like it's kind of done an inverse for me, where I've never been one to gamble either. I consider fantasy football probably the only form of gambling that I do. But I wonder if there's a net positive or net negative associated with fantasy's involvement with sports. Obviously it's it's basically sports betting, and obviously the rate of gambling problems among sports bettors is at least twice as high as gambling problems experienced by other gamblers. So would you consider fantasy football as having a positive net effect or a negative net effect in your opinion when it comes to general impact on sports when it comes to football? Actually,
I mean, that's a really good question. I would still, so the height, I think we're probably a little bit past the height of popularity when it comes to fantasy football.
Okay.
And I could just go off anecdotal evidence. I used to play in 6 leagues. The idea of that sounds atrocious.
Dear God.
6 leagues.
6.
You don't even know. Name a player. He's probably on one of my teams. You have no idea who is on your squads, managing them effectively. It's kind of just like a spray and pray approach to fantasy football. Now I'm at 2, and I feel good about 2. With that said, I really only enjoy the draft. The draft is super fun because everybody's together and they're talking crap and stuff like that. But after the draft, it's another job. You have to watch a 6-star
with 6 teams? Yeah.
Even with 2 teams. I mean, it feels like another job. I have to do roster
You probably had a
comparisons
spreadsheet with all your players on it and picking them. That's crazy.
I have secondhand PTSD. I have secondhand PTSD saying you had 6 teams.
Well, okay, that's
crazy.
You said
I don't anymore.
You said you didn't like slot machines, but 6 teams? That's some serious betting right
we're talking about this like it's some sort of...
Hey, now, by the way, now would be the time to mention that in 12 years I have 7 championships. So
okay, it's not singular.
Well,
I've been on your team.
Well, some of them you were on my team, but I did it solo. Okay,
solo. Yeah. Okay. So the Bull has a habit of doing this where he just kind of forgets that I've been on his team for 5 years now. And the reason we did this.
Take the
credit.
Someone's
someone's gonna take the credit. And I'll do all the work. The reason I bring this up, and the reason we even joined teams is because his daughter Beowulf, who's a frequent guest on the show, is my wife. So we had a point in time where we were watching football, and I said, let's join the fantasy league. We'll join teams. I don't want to manage one by myself. And then emotions got heightened. The Bull kept taking credit for all the victories, and I said for 1 year that I would go and do my own thing, and I did. And that was the year that I drafted Andrew Luck and was terrible and was last in the league. And now I've decided to never, ever leave his team because he put a voodoo curse on me. So, but I would not be able to function if I had 6 teams. That's, were you drafting Hall of Fame players?
It's insane. It's just one of those things where, and that's why I think that, the height of fantasy football has sort of dropped. And
yeah.
Because there is sort of I remember in 2020, we just did an auto draft for our league. And I remember it being, even though it was such a stressful year and football was kind of back, but, no fans in the stands and things like that, it was just such a weird season. But it was also kind of refreshing to not have a fantasy football team to worry about and stress about. Because it really is another job that you have to deal with. In addition to the long game days and prepping for home openers and things like that. And if you're a college football fan and an NFL fan, your weekends are done until February. It's a complete it dominates your life. And I think that there have been strides that have been made in recent years to allow more remote on the go viewings. And I think that that's really helped draw in more casual fans. But I also think that it's helped avid fans be okay with kind of, not dedicating their entire weekend to sitting in front of a TV. I can watch the clips on social media. I can, for a Saturday, college football, I used to be parked in front of the TV from 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. And of course it was, because I was also covering college sports at the time too, but that would just, your entire day is done. It's inside, you're eating like crap, it's just, it's not, it's not,
you eat? I starve myself. I don't eat at all during game day.
It's stress eating, maybe.
Yeah.
What's kind of interesting about fantasy in general, though? I think it's created a situation where you're fans of individuals instead of the teams now. And I don't think that's a horrible thing. It gave me some interest in other teams that I wouldn't have watched otherwise. but I think it's also swung the individual players into kind of a powerful position within their organizations. And one of the things I know, Blythe, with your background with the Jags and sports in general, I think you've probably seen or maybe have context in how the players have been able to, number one, use social media platforms to reach out directly to their fan bases, which are hugely expanding, but also use that as a lever in their careers in a way they've never been able to do before.
Yeah, 100%, because traditionally what you've seen is that reporters and journalists will develop relationships with players. They go into the locker room. They're down at the stadium each day. They're building those relationships over time. And some of the, I guess, even like former players, they were, especially the savvy ones, knew how to use the media in a way that would benefit them, not only during the season. And I don't want to say use them, but, use that. Yeah, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. So the reporter needs a good story, you give them the good story, and then in the off season or, whenever you're retired or something and you're involved in several different, entrepreneurial activities and you need somebody to spread the word, you need some radio time, that's where the journalists would come in and really help shine a light on what those additional activities, that player was involved in. And also from, just a story perspective. But then it started to transition a little bit where reporters started to abuse that relationship. When I talk about developing those relationships with players, this is in the 80s and the 90s, and when it comes to like the 2000s, you see sort of the transition more into like clickbaity, or what a lot of folks would call like the clickbaity material, where you start having players that are having their quotes used against them. And I remember early on being taught, and I learned this from Dan Patrick. He's my favorite sports broadcaster of all time. He's been, I think, the sort of beacon into how you should structure a sports career if you were to pursue that path. And so with Dan Patrick, he was really the first one to sort of shine a light on taking audio clips or video clips and putting them out of context. And he would say, well, wait, what was said before you saw that clip? What was said after you saw that clip? He's like, that's where he would find the opportunity in the story to dig a little deeper and provide nuance to these discussions. Whereas, reporters in, say the 2000s were using these quotes and using these, a 30-second clip or a 10-second clip to take it out of context, take the player out of context. And the players were starting to get burned by this. And so they would, A, stop speaking to the media, or B, get, the media training and give the coach speak answer, the players speak answers, which are usually just very bland and boring, and they don't really have a lot of substance. But now, with the invention of social media, these players don't have to necessarily talk to reporters anymore. And if they do talk to reporters, it's more of the situation where the reporter is going to play ball, or you're not going to get anything.
Right.
And then it's also coincided with the teams. Now a lot of teams, I think every team now has their own internal media department. And so when player interviews are granted, they're not necessarily granted to the local journalists and the local interviews and the people who have developed those relationships. They're going on to the state-sponsored media, and they're going to give those state-sponsored answers to the questions that have probably been sent prior. And so that the player knows how to answer them. And if anything is said that's slightly out of context, they're just going to edit it out anyways. And so you have this hierarchy of media now within sports that you have to toe the line. And if you fall outside of that line, then you don't get media opportunities. You don't get opportunities to interview players. And so players now are sort of put in this tough position where they legitimately have friendships with some of the reporters and the journalists, and they want to get interviews to them, but the teams, that because they have their own internal media departments, won't allow it.
I would imagine they probably. I'd imagine they probably have contacts, or not contracts. Excuse me, that basically say these are the parameters for how you converse with the media and what you will do and what you won't. And I'd imagine people coming right out of college, the Trevor Lawrences and people like that. I mean, ultimately, these people are entertainers in a different sense, but they're entertainers. So it's not unlike, as a for instance, it's not unlike Disney. right? Disney Channel has agreements with their people that are on their shows that they have a certain protocol they follow, they have a certain way they relate to the public, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, including social media. So it's interesting to me to how, I guess if you're a veteran player, you can go around a lot of this. But if you're not, you probably have to toe the line, I would think.
It's all about talent. Talent exceeds your baggage, then you can pretty much do whatever you want. A perfect example of that is Jalen Ramsey with the Jaguars. He got away with so much stuff simply because he was a talented player. And we were willing to look completely past, some of the antics that he did. But he had, I could make an argument that some of those antics were justified and that he was right to do some of these crazy things in order to get out of his contract with the Jaguars in order to go to a winning organization. I think it really just depends on your talent, and if you have, that talent labeled on you, I think that there's a common, or not common, but I've heard broadcasters say, like, Aaron Rodgers could go and declare his support for Al-Qaeda, and he would still have a job in the NFL.
Yeah.
Because his talent exceeds baggage. You get to the point where your talent does not, or your baggage exceeds your talent, it's over for you. You can say whatever you want, but it's going to have other consequences that are unforeseen. And unforeseen meaning you're probably going to lose your job. You're probably not going to get a really great contract the next time around. And so I guess you burn more bridges than you maybe would have.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. Hey, Wolf,
that's interesting.
What do you think about the use of the social platforms that are out there, though? Twitter probably is the one. It kind of is like a cesspool for anybody. And I think that's the one that predominantly sports individuals have used over the course of the last decade, to get out their information, rightly or wrong. And of course, they can't retract that either. So it's not like you're talking about where something's, with your Dan Patrick example, where a clip is taken out of context. If player A tweets out whatever they're going to tweet out, I mean, it is what it is. They're the ones that tweeted it out, and they have to either, come clean with that or let people know what they really meant at a time. But what do you guys both think of these platforms and their usage? Because Blythe, you're an expert at utilizing different platforms for business purposes, and ultimately we're talking about whether you're an individual, you're marketing yourself. Whether you're an NFL team, you're marketing yourself. You're a logistics company, you're marketing your process, your service, your product. What do you guys think about the usage of this and where it's headed?
Well, Blythe, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So I think, as far as Twitter is concerned, I have seen fewer athletes use it and focus on it. I would say Instagram is probably, when it comes to the NFL, I would say Instagram is probably the number one used platform. Twitter is, like you said, it's a toxic place. There's a reason why, sort of things that make you angry appear more often on that platform. And that goes for athletes too. I have seen and this is anecdotal, of course, but I've seen so many instances of, because I'm still, I follow a lot of sports people and from all different markets. I see a lot of times that players will search their name after a game and find all the people that said something bad about them and then block them. It's just such a strange thing to do, to seek out what other people are saying about you, but it's also used as a motivation tactic. So-and-so doesn't believe in me, so I'm going to use this as motivation on the field. So it kind of works in two different ways. I still think, though, that involving the opinions of people who don't necessarily matter, who don't know you, is just such a flawed strategy. But I would say that still, from a marketing standpoint, that a lot of these players now are getting the training from, their own agents that are training them on how to use these platforms to the best of their advantage. And that's really where I think all of us could kind of take a lesson, no matter what industry you're in or whatever you're promoting, is to use social media to your advantage. Don't let social media use you. And I think that that's for a lot of young players who haven't had that formal training yet, especially in sort of the college environment. You're seeking negative information out is going to be a bad time for you, because ultimately, fans are short for fanatic. And it's not necessarily something that you want to take to heart. with a lot of in-game emotions or post-game emotions. And so I think a lot of players could do well by just ignoring social media, but it's also a big part of how we do business and how we interact. So using social media better and finding the time to use it when you're not in those emotional moments, when you're in those emotional states, I think could be best served, I think, for a lot of fans and athletes in general.
Yeah. I have to agree. I think social media, obviously, Blythe, if you listen to any other episodes, I have a bias against social media, a very extreme one. I have a background in digital marketing from a corporate perspective, so I understand what goes into, what's needed to get attention to things and all that jazz. At the same time, I see social media right now when it comes to celebrities and athletes as kind of like what I would imagine the unlimited credit card limits were in the 70s for college kids. It's something that, if used correctly, can be a benefit. For most people, don't use it correctly. And to your point, I do think it makes sense to teach these individuals how to use it. I frankly think it would be better just to have a team of people from the company, the team itself, actually manage those platforms instead of having individual access. But then, comes in the argument of autonomy of image and all that jazz when it comes to the celebrity that is the athlete. I think that social media generally provides a negative distraction for players. And frankly, I would say the same probably goes for fantasy football. I listened to a recent interview with Austin Eckler after his disastrous first week. We have him on our team. He had a disastrous first week from a fantasy perspective, and he went on an interview and said, hey, yeah, we got a full season. Don't worry about it. Had a better game week 2. Does he really need to do that? No, he doesn't. And should he really do that? I don't think he should. I think that that's a distraction from his occupation. It's a distraction from what is his job, and I think it's just unhealthy, frankly. And that's just because I have a general disposition of net negative against social media because of individuals like, Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg and all the quote-unquote lizard humans that run our social media platforms.
I will say one interesting part of just content create, because I feel like most of us have to be sort of somewhat of a content creator in whatever kind of line of work you're in. But one interesting part I think that's happening is Draymond Green hosts his own podcast after games now, and I think that is so fascinating from just where sports have gone or where we're coming from. Where we talked about journalists and stuff developing those relationships and going into the locker room after a game is over. That's where you see the most passion, the most emotion, and that's where really a lot of great storytelling comes from. Draymond Green, instead of going live with the media afterwards, instead owns his own media and puts all of that emotion into a podcast. I think that that's brilliant versus just going on Twitter and putting out a player speak or a coach speak. We'll get back at it next week. No one cares. I know some fans care, but people want substance. They want to know that you're passionate. And of course, if you make it to the upper echelon of sports, you're somewhat passionate about that particular sport. But you would be surprised at how often I think players are reserved because they don't want to convey that passion, that emotion. And I think that Draymond Green kind of flipping the script and owning the passion and owning his platform and owning his own voice and putting that out to the world, I think it's such a brilliant move because then that's going to set him up not only currently, but come the day that he retires and he's not able to play anymore, he still has that podcast, that it's an owned media platform, unlike some of these other social media platforms. He owns his podcast. And so I think that that's a really interesting play that I would love to see more athletes take advantage of, because that's what we want. That's why I think with NASCAR, and you can rent the headsets and watch a race and hear the real communications that are going on. I think that hearing those real communications, I don't know that it would ever happen in the NFL, but being able to hear like a mic'd up quarterback or a mic'd up safety, giving their in-game commentary and shit talking and all, fans would eat that up. Talk about monetization opportunities. Like that right there, that's people gravitate towards passion.
That's really interesting. And from strictly thinking about business, the teams themselves would want to ride that somehow and monetize that somehow. But I'm not sure. Your example with Draymond Green, he has created his own business of being a player / media. right? It's not like the team hired him it's almost like they outsourced his talent to work on their club. And that's a different perspective of looking at things. And I mean, in the logistics industry, I've owned a few companies and been an employee of companies as well. And there were rules. And if you wanted to toe the company line and say certain things and have a media person or a finance guy from New York want to talk to you about the ports or whatever the case may be, then you knew from the company you were with how to create that. Now, these people are still working for Jacksonville or whoever the case may be, but they're kind of creating a second business at the same time, tucked underneath of it. I'm not sure how that develops. I think you're right, though. I think it's a great idea. I would certainly rather listen to mic'd up players than half of the color commentators out there.
Yeah, God.
Right.
Oh, my God.
I don't know that the NFL would ever allow it, and I'm honestly surprised that the NBA has allowed it for Draymond to be able to do this, or even at the team level. I could see that being a provision in future contracts to prevent them from doing that, because it does mess with the current hierarchy of the team media and then the team approved journalists and broadcasters, and just going down that sort of, I guess, media food chain. But owning your own platform, especially in a long form format, then folks can go to that podcast and they can listen to his true, unfiltered insights and hear the full clips, and not just a 30-second sort of, clip that's generated to create outrage, among, folks on social media. I think that it's a brilliant play from Draymond Green. I'm just hoping that more of it happens instead of, leagues kind of seeing it. And it's probably going to be the latter, but leagues are going to see it as, a danger to the current hierarchy and probably prevent active players from doing that.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate, because I would say the podcasting aspect of what Draymond Green is doing is actually healthier than going on and Twitter raging or doing something like that. I mean, it's not only healthier for Draymond Green as an athlete to be able to voice his opinion in an unfiltered setting, but also I think it's healthier from the perspective of the fan. I struggle when I watch, as to your point, Blythe, when I watch interviews, it's like, okay, we know what you're going to say. Swipe on to the next one. Oh, he's saying the same thing. Swipe on to the next one. Oh, next week's going to be a win. Okay, cool. Like, we get what the canned responses is. And, frankly, from my perspective, I think it's antiquated. And I think if the NFL or other media organizations or other sports institutions actually adopted this almost progressive form of humanizing their players, then we wouldn't have some of the problems that we have. I mean, prime example is Antonio Brown. Clearly, he has probably something going on outside of his emotional outbursts online, but his emotional outbursts online were utilized to generate that hype that people are talking about. I mean, the guy ruined his career just by being a maniac. And that was not all of it was craziness. All of it was him saying, if I do this, social media is going to give me this response. The guy tried starting a rap career. So I don't think that's beneficial for him as an individual, nor do I think it's beneficial for social media, nor do I think it's beneficial for the teams, which are companies. So we got to pick your poison. Either you stick with the corporatized aspect of things where everyone falls in line and repeats the mantra of what the Colts or the Jaguars, the Chargers claim it is that given week, or you let the players, if they have exhibited some level of responsibility, express things in a creative way like Draymond Green. I think the second is better, frankly, but that's because I'm a believer of free market enterprise. So that's the unfortunate part. Yeah. So, but I don't know. It's interesting, and I've always wondered why there hasn't been a push to try and humanize a lot of things in the NFL specifically. I feel like just the corporatized Coca-Cola flavor is getting a little old, if that makes sense.
I mean, it was definitely it was a huge deal for the my cleats, my cause, or my cause, my cleats, I think is the way you actually pronounce it. But during the month of October, it's something like you can decorate, you can have your cleats customized to whatever charity that you want, and so it gives the players a little bit of an opportunity to get their personality out there, to share causes that they deem appropriate or that they're really passionate about, and that's where you see the NFL, giving just a little bit and allowing the players to have, some kind of a personality. outside of just, just having a helmet on and no one knows who these players are, and they're just sort of part of the machine that is the NFL. So that was a huge deal. I think that's only been around for a handful of years, the My Cause, My Cleats. So it remains to be seen on if the NFL will allow, players to have, sort of that post-game podcast instead of a post-game press conference. I lean more towards them not having it because they want to control the message. They want to control the narrative. And a lot of teams, Roger Goodell works for the owners, and the owners want to control that message as well. So I hope that we would have more players, making roads or making inways into having, a company-owned or brand-owned podcasts or videos that they can do right after games. And that removes the middleman. It removes the bias from journalists and broadcasters, even team media, that's trying to put you in a box and make you, fall in line. And I just think that there's so much more realism outside of that.
I think there's always a balance to be had too, and the priorities that a business has in any industry are going to be typically not fully aligned with the individual priorities of those that work for that business. And I think that outside of the time you're working, in this case on the field or in practice or whatever, that your time is your own. You can voice whatever opinion you want, and there are either positive or negative repercussions for that. And I think that the cleats thing is a very good compromise, if you will, to allow some of this stuff to be expressed, the personalities to be expressed in a way that's viewed by millions and millions of people because they're watching these games. But I do think it can go too far, and the pendulum can swing in different directions, and it can turn off ultimately the people that are paying for everybody's bills, and that's you and I that are watching this stuff. So that's interesting, because I know that the NFL has struggled with that over the last few years with some of the kneeling stuff and a lot of the different things that have occurred. Whether you agree or disagree with that's beside the point. The point is does it add to the business or not?
Well, I can see where you're coming from. That I think the reason we have those, I guess we could call them outbursts, because that's what I would see them as. And there's a lot. I'm making this very condensed, so forgive me for being a little black and white here. But I think it's because the players, in some ways, feel as if they're not treated as anything more than just a check for the organization. Which, to the organization's point, that is kind of what they are to some degree. With that being said, my argument would never trend into letting everyone have a pulpit to yell from, but my argument would trend to, okay, this individual exhibited some sort of level of conduct throughout college and his early years of the NFL to be able to exhibit some level of responsibility to represent the organization and to be able to be creative enough to have that outlook, like kind of Draymond Green. And I think, frankly, if companies took the time to do that with not only their own employees, but with in situations like the NFL with organizations, if they took the time to actually explore that, it would be a lot easier to do than I think they make it out to be. I think that there's a knee-jerk reaction in specifically American society in which we need to either treat someone specifically as an adult at all points of time without any leniency, or we treat them specifically as a child. And when it comes to the NFL and professional sports in general, we tend to go to the latter. And I think that's why you have those instances of extreme outbursts like Antonio Brown, or when Juju ran onto the field and started dancing on the logos. Like, those distractions they come from somewhere, and it could be a personality thing. It could also be them saying, "I feel as if I'm a cog in a machine." I mean, I could be wrong, but that's just kind of how I observe it, and I think it would definitely give not only a lot more interesting narratives to the NFL, but also a lot more humanity to the individuals behind the scenes, whether it comes to the organizations. That's why, what's that thing on HBO, not Two-A-Days, the documentary,
Knocks.
Hard Knocks. That's why it's so interesting, because it gives an insight into that, and I hope we move in that direction where it gives some granular substance to these organizations that has been sorely needed for a long time.
We all love to understand both the good and bad of our entertainers. I mean, that's you look at Hollywood and half the stuff you don't really want to know for sure, but when you become famous enough, they're going to tell you what they think anyway. And I think that's true with football, with sports in general. And to Blythe's point earlier, it really depends on how good you are. If you're in the hierarchy of talent up there where you can command higher salary. You're also going to command more attention. You can also say pretty much whatever you want and get away with it, and that's fine. And so it's up to the companies themselves to determine, what's good or bad for them. And when they think it's bad, they'll let those people go. And when they think it's the balance of the dollars they're making overweights the negative press that they may get from one or two individuals, that's the decision they'll make.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not advocating for Jamarcus Russell. Yeah. I'm not advocating for Jamarcus Russell when he was playing to have a podcast. So I think it does exhibit some interesting potentiality for the NFL, though. I think that they should explore that, frankly.
And it's also up to the player too. If you are going to be doing a post-game podcast, you better be playing well. If you're not playing well, maybe you should be podcasting, or maybe you shouldn't be doing, all of these extra things that, aren't, what is it, the Arizona quarterback that was kind of crucified for he needed to read the playbook instead of playing video games or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember which guy that was, but that's probably
I know who you're referencing.
Yeah, Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
So it's one of those situations where it's like, who cares how much video games he's playing if he's good at his job? If he's good at it, but if he's not good at his job, that's where people are going. That's going to be the first thing that fans and journalists and media will question him about. Well, maybe you should be, and that's sort of the risk and the reward of when you create content and you tell people, what you think and what you do and the reasons why you do it. You better be really talented, you better be really good at your job, and then, be able to accomplish these other tasks in addition to that main job. And I think that's still really important. Otherwise, like I said, it's going to be the first thing that people come after you by. Like, stop doing the podcast if you want to, have a double-double or a triple-double or something.
So the podcasting thing is real interesting to me that he's doing and others are doing it. And Eckler has his own podcast, fantasy podcast kind of thing too. And so other people are doing, not right after the games or anything like that, but that's a little different. But I think that, I turned on the TV the other day to watch, I think it was Thursday Night Football, and it was only on Amazon, right? And so that streaming service has that now for at least part of the season. And the usage of the internet and these platforms and these powerful tech companies they're all media companies in one shape or another, for sure, which is great. But they also have a lot of technologies that haven't come to fruition yet. Maybe it's the on-field audio stuff you're talking about. Maybe we can all get an Oculus and put it on our face and be on the field with these guys with the way some of the camera work is done. Who knows? It's I'm not sure I'd want to be on the field. That'd be
that would be so strange and Orwellian.
It'd be strange, but I'm telling you. Madden 35, or whatever the next 10 years from now.
Madden keeps doing what they're doing.
Quarterback, right?
They keep doing what they're doing. They're going to lose the rights, as they should, because EA Sports is absolutely not representing the people who purchase their product in any way. It's gotten really bad. On the topic of entertainment from a video game perspective, but I do think that would be interesting to try out. Just a whole cadre of individuals on one side of the stadium with Oculuses on.
Well, they wouldn't be in the stadium; they'd be at their homes. To Blythe's point earlier, the casual fan can now be an avid fan because I'm just using this as an example off the top of my head, of course. But the fact is here we are sitting online talking to each other, and I mean the internet's going in and out a little bit, so we need to get the 3.0 version of that. But the fact is a few years ago, I mean, this wasn't possible. This. And so technology keeps changing very, very rapidly and is getting better and better. And so these additional ways, and there's a lot of smart people out there thinking of ways to monetize these different things and make their end consumer, those that want to consume all this entertainment. And you and I both, we all know that entertainment it's freaking half our lives now. Every streaming service under the sun, everything we run into, every time you pick up your phone and look at it, there's something coming at you to entertain or inform, or a combination of those. And I'm all for that. I like technological changes and everything, but it's hard to see how far this will go and how ingrained this could be from a sports perspective for the casual fan to become avid again.
Yeah.
I struggle with casual fans becoming avid fans. I don't know what that path looks like, because I think our attention, because of all of these different things commanding our attention spans are actually dropping. And so when you have these instances, like an NFL game is, typically, it's 4 quarters, of course, but how much of that time is actually spent playing is something ridiculous, like 3 minutes and 30 seconds of actual playing time. And so I think what we will see more of is just more fans choosing to be a fan in their own terms. I hear from countless people, especially ones that used to come to our tailgate spot, and now they just watch the game at home. They have their TV. They have, a 12-pack that costs, $1 a beer instead of $10 or $15 a beer at the game. They don't have to deal with parking. They don't have to deal with, all of the other, stresses, I guess, of going to a game. But they still miss the camaraderie. Because especially with the people that are watching the games from home, like my brother in particular, he used to be a season ticket holder along with my dad. And he hasn't gone to the games. And he picks up 1 or 2 games a year to go to. He doesn't go to every game. But during the away games, he wants us all to come over to his house because that's his opportunity to have that camaraderie.
Right.
But all of us are like, no, we just spent, our entire day down at the stadium tailgating and doing all the things that this is our break time to be able to watch the game from home. So I think that there's still that camaraderie missing from the at-home experience. And I think that is probably the most important thing that brings sports fans together is that camaraderie, that, no matter your demographic or your economic class, like everybody comes together to root for your team. And doing it in a stadium, and when your team is actually winning and competitive, there's nothing else like it. And I think that is still going to be something that NFL teams are going to struggle with getting folks to the stadium. But once they get to the stadium, especially if the team is good, then I think that is the winning formula, is to have a competitive team. So the casual fan, I think will just increase because our attention spans are dropping, because there's so much availability just to watch that, 3-minute, maybe a 4-minute video that's all the plays, and you don't have to spend your entire Sunday in order to get that same experience. But it's also going to be an experience that in nowhere compares to being there with your friends, your family, your football family, and cheering all together and screaming all together and crying, that's a penalty or pass interference or, all of those different things that are involved in like sports fan culture. That it's still the one sort of live environment that brings everybody together. And I just don't know that it can ever be replaced, no matter what technology is introduced.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the message that I take from that is that, you can have all the technologies in the world to give us the benefit of being able to see things anywhere and do things from almost anywhere. But it can't replace the community of face-to-face interactions that you have, especially in a large group like that. It's all rooting in the same direction or in different directions depending on who you're rooting for. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that's part of what's missing from the workplace in general over the last couple of years with this, all the stay-at-home kind of things and the non-office. And there's some changes to be created and made in the next few years to create a hybrid situation of this. And maybe that's what we're talking about here too. You're going to still have people that want to get together for that community interface, to have that culture continue. And then you're going to have the more casual people that really just don't care about that anymore. So
yeah, I would agree. I think it's definitely a hybrid approach, that it's not just sports, it's really any industry that requires you to be in person. It's embracing technology, but also, fulfilling that desire for us just as a species, our need to be social, to be surrounded by other people. I think that there's a way to do both, but I think it's more evident in increasing the casual fan than maybe turning casual fans into avid fans. If that makes sense. I think more avid fans, especially if you've burned a lot of like losing seasons, probably are more dangerously closer to either being in an insane asylum or just moving to be a casual fan or not watching altogether. There are some people that I know that they don't watch at all anymore, and I think that's also kind of heartbreaking. Like there's a reason why sports is one of the most successful industries, I think, out of all of them, is because it brings us together. It creates that camaraderie and it creates that special bond.
Right.
Not even with your own team's fans. Like I can tell you the relationships that we've built even with other fans. I mean, with Greatways, for example, everybody that works in the production area of Greatways are all Titans fans. 5 years ago, if you would have told me I would be working with a team of Titans fans, I would have burned my own house to the ground.
Well, they got to be crying right now.
Never happened. So to be able to, I guess, humanize the opposing team has been a little bit of a challenge, but I think for a lot of sports fans, they're not as crazy as I used to be, and maybe they kind of grow out of it a little bit when you, I don't know, maybe find more things to do.
Right.
Hey, not everyone can successfully manage 6 fantasy teams. Okay, I mean you're in a tier above the rest.
It was not successful. I will say it's not successful.
No, Blythe, that's when you come in and say, I won every league. I got every player I wanted, and I ran the table. That's when, I don't know. That's still, I'm still stuck on that. 6
well, I trust that you didn't
wild.
pick Andrew Luck at any point. That's all I know.
Oh, my God. Dude, it was a foolproof choice.
My name was Go Luck Yourself. So I did have that.
Go Luck Yourself? Is that what you had was your fantasy names? Awesome. Yeah. Great name.
Yeah, mine was Out of Luck. Or, Luck Yourself. So, yeah, it was not good. It was not a good time. I blacked out that entire season, frankly. Just not good. I made so many moves, and I had to pay the league so much money for the moves because I just couldn't figure out how to get the team to go. It was bad. Yeah, it's depressing.
Yeah. Was that the last season you played?
No. I mean, we're doing well this year. But like in this league. Yeah, I still play. In this league, though, specifically, I'm on his team again. That was the last year where I wasn't on his team. And by the way, I blame you, Bull, for doing that because we were in Vegas.
Me?
Every year we do our Every year in Vegas we do our fantasy draft, and this was the most strange Top Gun sequence of events. All the fantasy guys are in the pool playing volleyball as men do, and we were there playing volleyball, and he's talking with one of the guys who's been on the show. We refer to him as the Rooster, and he was like, you know what? Yeah, I could win without this guy. And he said, okay, we'll do it. And that's how it happened.
They were calling me out. They were calling me out, saying it was all about you, and I said, I can win without.
It was
without the Wolf.
It was.
What are you talking about?
See, this is me, and this is you, and the bus pressure from the fantasy
league. What's the end of the story,
league.
Wolf? Come on now.
I don't remember. I blacked it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't remember it all.
You know what, Blythe? This has been terrific. You've got more insights than I even thought you would have, and I got a feeling you probably have stories that you've decided not to tell us, especially about how in the world you came up with this guy's gal thing. Because I always say it wrong. I say it wrong, and luckily I don't type it wrong because I don't want to type it wrong.
That's not my site. And I work with that site in particular. Unfortunately, I do not publish to it anymore. So it's one of those things. I keep it optimized. I say that. I'm totally lying. Actually just a month ago. So I wrote a book years ago, self-published, and just recently, as of this year, within the last few months, have added that content from the book onto the site. So I still will say that it's still my baby. It's still my first blog. It's still my first website that led to so many, wonderful experiences and opportunities, including the chance to cover my favorite team, which I don't know if it was a blessing. I don't want to say it wasn't a blessing. It did affect my fandom in ways that I never thought that it would, but I still feel like I was very truthful to the voice fan. I on that show in particular, I was very much everybody else was a traditional journalist, and they went through, or not a traditional journalist, but they were very I would say they would toe the company line, and they would do the things that the Jaguars wanted them to do. I was speaking from the fan perspective. I wasn't sitting in the press box. I paid for my season tickets. I was sitting in the stands with the fans. I didn't go to practices because 20 reporters are tweeting out the same video clip or tweeting out the same stat or the same, media-friendly, PR statement. I didn't see a need in that, but that's where, the voice for the female fan, that's where I really put a strong priority in both radio and the blog itself. And I'm still, I'll never get rid of that blog. It will always be active. It will always be live. I do think the name now is a little problematic, which is why I kind of, geared a little bit away from that side of the thing, or that side.
It's my second favorite site. Both of them. They're bookmarked. They're right next to each other, and I just flip a coin. Yeah, thanks for a very interesting.
You know what's funny is both the sports industry that you've been in and now the logistics transportation industry you've been in needs more female voices. Absolutely, positively.
Yeah.
I just got back from my IANA conference, and while there was many more women there than there have been in the past, and we finally have been physically there for the last 2 years, it still needs to grow considerably. And hey, we can't thank you enough for coming on for, I was going to say a few minutes, but it's been a little longer than a few minutes to kind of give us your insights and everything. Where can our viewers and listeners, see you, get in touch with you, see what you do out there on the platforms?
Sure. So I know, my main career focus is on content within the supply chain and the logistics industry. But I really try to come at it from a marketer's perspective. And so for folks who may not know, marketers in this space have so much to keep up with. They have to keep up with not only just traditional marketing strategies, but they also have to keep up with the insane amount of news that we have around, logistics and supply chain. So I try to make content for, that marketer who has so many other things, or that entrepreneur has so many other things on their plate. They might not know what maritime shipping is. They might not know what LTL shipping is. But my conversations are for, I would say, I don't want to say at a fifth grade level, but I like to, sort of position myself as asking those fifth grade level questions to understand how it fits into the greater world, the greater, I sort of geopolitics and diplomacy and economic policy and all that, starting at a really baseline level. So if you like that baseline into, I guess sort of more the higher tier educational level of content, that's what I prioritize. And you can find a lot of that content or any of my social channels over at everythingislogistics.com.
That's fantastic. Awesome. That is fantastic. And I've been on that site a number of times, and I've seen what you do on FreightWaves with Cyberly, and I've been it's been a pleasure to have you a guest on my little tiny podcast as well on the logistics side. So we can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing with us. And Wolf, do you have anything else to add there?
Thanks again for tuning in, Blythe. We totally appreciate you. We would love to do it again. I think there's plenty to talk about within the football sphere as well as the social media sphere and the marketing sphere. Again, just a reminder to our viewers, if you like what you hear, if you like what you see, go ahead and give us a follow on Instagram, on YouTube. Make sure to check out Blythe's content as well. We have episodes every week, and we can't wait to see you guys next week.